Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Jeffrey Epstein and his ties to Harvard have been very well publicized at this point. We know that they had a very, very cozy relationship, and we know that Harvard played loose with the truth. The question I have always had is, where is the outcry from the world of academia? Now, we have had some people step forward, like Dr. Stephen DeLay, who were outraged by the behavior of not only Harvard, but by the board. And we needed more of that. We need more people who were in the world of academia to be critical of this sort of thing. There is no place for this in the halls of a place like Harvard. When you send your children to Harvard for that amount of money, you should expect certain things, okay? Like, they should get a good education. They should have quality professors. And they shouldn't have to worry about a pedophile having an office on the campus. In today's article, we have another person, this time a professor from Harvard, who has a few things to say about what occurred. Our article is from the Scientific American. The author is Naomi Oreskes. Headline: Jeffrey Epstein's Harvard connections show how money can distort research. Letting the rich pay for science that interests them is a bad idea, even if they aren't convicted sex offenders. And I agree with that. I think that this research should be something that is done by these departments, and they should really be vetting where this money comes from. There's no excuse in this day and age with all of the technology to not know where these donations are originating from. This past May, Harvard University, where I teach, issued a report on its relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. It was an admirably forthright mea culpa highlighting three areas of concern. The first was the contradiction of addressing sexual assault and harassment on campus while accepting money from a man who had promoted sexual abuse of minors. And I don't know how they can do both, right? I don't know how you can talk about sexual assault and harassment on campus from your ivory tower while at the same time accepting money from Jeffrey Epstein, having him involved in the campus, he has an office, all of that. Absolutely hypocritical and disgusting. The second was the mockery made of academic standards when, after donating $200,000 to the psychology department, Epstein was appointed as a visiting fellow there despite a complete lack of appropriate academic qualifications. And we talked about this already as well. Imagine being one of these people who has put in the time, put in all the work to try and become a fellow, and then Jeffrey Epstein just cruises right on in with his $200,000 donation and gets that title. I would be absolutely incensed. I would go crazy, honestly, if that was the case. If I got passed up for this Jeffrey Epstein guy to become a fellow because he had a bunch of dough, forget it. I would light the place on fire verbally. The third was his close connection to Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics. Even after his release from prison, Epstein continued to be a frequent visitor. Between 2010 and 2018, Epstein, at that point a registered sex offender, went to the PED offices more than 40 times. During that period, he had an on-campus office and a key card and a passcode with which he could enter buildings during off hours. Imagine that, huh? A key card, he had a pass, he can go around off hours. And we're not talking about a normal human being here. We're not talking about a man who is just an average rich guy who has a couple of quirks. We're talking about a serial predator who loved to prey on underage girls and girls who appeared to be underage. And you're going to basically give this guy the keys to the kingdom of Harvard? You're going to let this predator romp around your campus looking for girls to send Ghislaine in to groom? It is absolutely beyond the pale of unconscionable. It's not just that an awful person was able to buy a halo of respectability. The Epstein affair brings to light a much larger problem. It undermines the integrity of the research enterprise when individuals can pick and choose lines of inquiry that appeal to them simply because they can pay for them. And you would think, right, that in a place like Harvard, there would be plenty of money to go around for projects. I mean, they charge enough to go to the damn school. So you would think that there would be plenty of benefactors around that are willing to pony up the dough. Normal people, right? Real businessmen without these sort of proclivities, dudes that aren't sex traffickers. I mean, it's really that hard to find them. There are tons of rich people around, tons of people who went to Harvard. I am sure some of them would have gladly ponied up some dough. But instead, Harvard decided to get in bed with this serpent, and not only get in bed with this serpent, but open the gates to the backyard and let this serpent free amongst the students. Academic life is tough in part because researchers with good ideas have to compete for funding. When peer review operates properly, it identifies the best ideas to support, usually by using panels, not individuals, to see it that a range of views is represented. And I think that that's probably the best way to go about it, right? A panel, a bunch of people taking a look at what's going on to see who should get the funds, who has the best idea, and that's the proper method for something like this. But instead, it's all about guys like Jeffrey Epstein, bagmen, who show up and they move heaven and earth with their donations. And even in a place like Harvard, folks, even with these scientists, it's all about the money. The process is imperfect, but women, people of color, young scholars, investigators at non-elite universities, and individuals promoting ideas that challenge conventional wisdom at least have a chance. And I think that's a good thing, right? There are so many smart people out there from all walks of life, for all colors, all creeds, all races. And I think it's important, especially in an institution like Harvard, that everybody has an equal opportunity, if their ideas are good enough, to get funding. You shouldn't have to get funding from a guy like Jeffrey Epstein. Again, I am sure that there are many benefactors at Harvard who would gladly donate some money to this sort of research. But it was lazy, it was easy, and they knew that Epstein was ready to come out of the pocket not only for their projects, but also for their personal gain. Because we know that these professors that were working with Epstein were also taking money on the side. But more than 2/3 of Epstein's donations, $6.5 million, went to PED director Martin Nowak. Epstein encouraged others to give $2 million to geneticist George Church. Both were already extremely well established and well funded. Epstein was helping the flush get flusher. Church notes that Epstein's funding supported not just him, but also his large and diverse team. Nowak did not reply to a request for comment. And again, these guys that Jeffrey Epstein was funding, I don't think he was just doing it out of the kindness of his heart. There was an ulterior motive here. He wanted access to this research. The people that were running him as an asset wanted access to this research. Do you think it's just a coincidence that he was basically just in the middle of Los Alamos and the Santa Fe Institute with his location in New Mexico? That's not a coincidence. He had access to scientists at both places. And Lord only knows what the hell sort of information they gave him. What made it even worse was the Epstein was a latter-day eugenicist whose interests were tied to a delusional notion of seeding the human race with his own DNA. And if you think he wasn't talking about that with these scientists, you're missing the point here. Jeffrey Epstein and his scientist cronies, they all were on the same page. These people knew what Epstein was after, they knew what he wanted, and they willingly got into bed with him. Given this stance, it is particularly disturbing that he focused his largesse on research on the genetic basis of human behavior. Human genetics is an ethically sensitive and intellectually contested domain where it behooves us to ensure that the highest standards of scientific rigor are in place and that the non-genetic explanations for behavior are given a fair chance to compete. And that was not the case. Jeffrey Epstein inserted himself into a highly controversial scientific subject and nobody called him out. Nobody stepped up to the plate and asked, what the hell is going on here, Martin Nowak? Why are you accepting so much money from Jeffrey Epstein? Why are you palling around with Jeffrey Epstein? Why are you visiting his properties? But nobody did any of that. It was just all par for the course. And to tell you the truth, folks, what that tells us is that this is just how things were done. This was business as usual at Harvard and these other universities. And their canned explanations and their apologies are garbage. Scientists might claim that Epstein's money in no way caused them to lower their standards, but we have broad evidence that the interests of funders often influence the work done, and that is scary. Again, because we know Epstein was not just working for himself. We know that Epstein had handlers. We know that they had demands. So, with these scientists and the projects that they're working on, it terrifies me to know that these people were giving Jeffrey Epstein their research, I would guess, and who knows who Epstein was passing that along to. The New York Times concluded that in this case it led researchers to give credence to some of Mr. Epstein's half-baked scientific musings. True or not, it should trouble us that a corrupt man was making decisions affecting research at a major U.S. university. He had no academic competence, yet he effectively made choices about which research initiatives were interesting and promising. I'm sorry to share that with you folks. I know that we like to think that our scientists and our doctors are above reproach, that they would never, ever get into bed with Jeffrey Epstein. But that is not the case. Like in any other part of the world or field that you might be in, money talks. Money talks, and especially when it's Jeffrey Epstein type money. Moreover, when Epstein got into trouble, several faculty members defended him and even visited him in jail. When Epstein's lawyer, Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz, needed help to argue on semantic grounds that Epstein was not guilty as charged, he reached out to Harvard psychologist and linguist Steven Pinker. Pinker, who never took funds from Epstein, says he did not know to what use his advice was being put and aided Dershowitz only as a favor to a friend and a colleague. But that is precisely the point. Epstein had purchased friends in high places, and those friends had friends who helped him, even if inadvertently. Well, I wouldn't go that far, and I think you're being a little kind to them, saying it was inadvertent, but to be honest with you, I think they all knew what Epstein was, and I think that they didn't care. Because at the end of the day, it was all about funding these projects. It was all about more money in the bank. And the scientific pursuit of whatever topic that they were studying went out the window when Jeffrey Epstein came in and tainted the situation with his money and his requests. Again, folks, I don't have any direct evidence, right, that I can point to tell you, all right, well, you can see here how these scientists were giving Jeffrey Epstein their research and Epstein was doing whatever with it. But if Jeffrey Epstein was working for an intelligence agency, if Jeffrey Epstein was compiling blackmail data on powerful people, what would make us think that he was not also collecting the secrets from the scientific world and passing them on to his handlers? These matters have come to light because Epstein was a criminal, but Harvard is not alone in accepting tainted money. Universities need to develop policies to ensure that research funding is based on merit, not cronyism, and researchers who are seeking public trust must be able to show that their own ethical compasses are not deflected by the magnetism of money. Well, that's definitely how it should be, but I think that it's going to be hard to get these institutions on board with that. We all know that money is the life's blood of these projects, and we all know that there are other men and women like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell out there. It is up to us, and it is most certainly up to these universities to hold them to a higher standard when receiving funds for these schools. Because if not, we're just going to have a repeat of this later on down the road. Another sicko's going to show up, and he's going to exploit the same loopholes and exploit the same shoddy, shitty system, and we're going to have a repeat of Jeffrey Epstein all over again. Unless, of course, more people like Naomi Oreskes and Dr. Stephen DeLay step forward. When academia starts to rally around this and academia starts to call out their own, then we are most certainly on the right path. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. The link that goes with this article can be found in the description box. And to those of you who have donated to the GoFundMe, thank you very much. All right, everybody, we will be back later on.